Now East Johnson didn't start out as East Johnson. It started out as Perkinsville, named after a man named Thomas Perkins, who built the first mill here. He built it in the island between the bridges. It was a trip hammer factory. And he ran it for a while until it burnt down. And then he acquired some financing to rebuild it. And he ran it for a while, but he couldn't keep up the payment, so they foreclosed on him. And he left. So it became Perkinsville, and it stayed Perkinsville until 1892, when the post office decided to set up a post office here. We had to change our name because there was already another Perkinsville down near Springfield, Vermont. So we changed it to East Johnson. And the first postmaster was Will Stearns, who ran the mills up on top of the hill. He kept that for 2 years. But he was starting to branch out into creameries, and I think it took up a lot of time because he gave it up and it moved down to the store. Frank Hayford took it over, and of course Charlie took it over after that. But by the time the Ora Richards bought the store, they have discontinued the post office, went to rural delivery. Right after Thomas Perkins built his factory, the Stearnses came here. You had Nathan Stearns, John Stearns, Otis Stearns, Hiram Stearns. Those are the big names. Nathan built the first mill. It was across the river from this mill here in the island. It was a combination wool carding mill, grist mill, and it had a little sawmill attached. John and Otis built on top of the hill. They each had their separate mill in roughly the same location. John Hayford did wooden hand rakes, farm implements, and other kind of wooden implements. Otis did butter tubs, wooden butter tubs. So from 1830s, mid-1830s till mid-1880s, or 70s, mid-1870s, we had 4 mills going here. In the mid-1870s, Otis's butter tub business was expanding, and he didn't have room. So he either gave or sold his building to John, his brother, moved down the river to Stern Street, and built a mill down there. You can see the remnants of the dam just below the Beard swimming hole. So we were down to 3 mills. Now across the street from where this mill is, that little piece of island there, at one time there was a woodworking shop, and that got wiped out when the dam in Lake Eden blew out, and the Guyon River just come right down and flooded everything out. A lot of damage here. Later on they built a blacksmith shop there. So about the only thing East Johnson was missing was a church, and we never had a church here. The Stearnses, I don't know when the Stearns mill went out of business. I would say just before the war. It appears that the grist mill went out of business probably the 1920s, because I saw the old newspaper article that said Hallie Stearns has moved his grist mill in East Johnson down to back of Railroad Street, and the only grist mill we had was this one. So somewhere in there. So probably by World War II we only had 1 mill left, and it's this one here. But that's not the original mill. In 1892, this mill burnt down. And the guy that owned it, Fred Whiting, sold it to some interest in Rutland, I think it was. And it laid vacant. The site laid vacant for 3, 4, 5 years. And then the Hayford brothers, William and Charlie Hayford, built a whole new mill. And I'd say by 1898 they had it going. And probably William ran it for a while because Charlie Hayford had been contracted to build the school down in Johnson. The first part of what is now the Johnson Elementary School. And but after he got that done, he ran the mill and a few other things. Will Stearns took over from his father John about 1885 or 6. And he ran that mill, and he was shipping products to, he was always going to Boston, Portland, Maine, places like that. He had a big business. At one time it was thought that he was the largest rake maker in New England. Wooden rakes, you know, farm implements, tool handles, all kinds of stuff like that. And he was also into the creamery business. He built a creamery here somewhere. I'm not sure where it was. He built a creamery in St. Albans. He bought a creamery in Fairfield. Built a creamery up in Eden. Charlie Hayford built him a creamery in St. Albans. At that time, the railroads had perfected the refrigerated car. It's ice car. And the milk could be shipped down country. Boston, New York, whatever, Springfield. And he was getting into that business. He wasn't the politician that his cousin C.H. Stearns was. He was more of a businessman, and a better businessman than C.H. Stearns. So he ran that for, I don't know how long he ran it. He may have ran that whole business till he died. And I'm not sure who took over after that. I don't think his son Hallie did, Harold Stearns. But in Johnson, the Stearns name, whether it's Will or especially C.H. Stearns, were the big citizens. They were the big wigs of Johnson, the whole Stearns family. Hiram Stearns, the fourth brother, he did run a business up here. He made horse-drawn rakes for a while. I saw one of his advertisements in the 1866 newspaper. I don't know how long he ran that, but later on he went up to North Hyde Park, did some mill, and had a mill up there, and then he moved to Eden, where he had a mill. He had a logging operation with his son-in-law.
So we had one business here in 51.
51, this mill was still running behind us in the island. It was
operated for 2 years.
2 years when we were here. So
they were doing bowling pins.
Yeah.
And that shut down, and that was the end of the mills. But we had the talc mines up in the Oberhill district.
Yeah.